Hello guys, I am Sheshpal and welcome to my channel Maths Pirates. Hope your day is being good. As a part of our journey into the world of mathematics, sailing the seas of knowledge, we covered the aspect of tally marks as well as we entered into the second level of abstraction, that is numbers. We also studied how the numbers simplified the calculations, tracking the quantities by abstract naming to unique form of quantities, right? In this video we will be covering the aspect of one as unique quantity. Now coming to one as unique quantity, these are all the subtopics that I am going to cover in this video. First, we will start with one as a fundamental counting quantity. What does it really mean? See, guys, if we need to count certain objects, the first fundamental requirement is existence. Existence of object. The object need to be existed in order to count it, right? As a part of existence of objects can be as many as possible, but fundamentally the minimum count that we say that the object is present is unity, which means one one collection or one object. See, the aspect of one might be simple for you guys in this video, but on a further journey, when we enter into the chapters like sets, relations, and also when we enter into the aspect of mensurations, where we'll be studying the perimeter, areas, volumes, etc., there will be you will be studying the aspect of fundamental principle of length or the fundamental principle of area and also the fundamental principle of volume. So the fundamental principle of length is meant for one dimensional study of objects, and fundamental principle of area is meant for two dimensional study of objects, and fundamental principle of volume stands for the study of three dimensional objects. The 2D and 3D objects, the fundamental principle of area and volume is nothing but the space, the measure of space present within the 2D as well as 3D shapes. The space within the 2D shape is treated as a 2D space, whereas the space and the emptiness within the 3D shapes is considered as 3D shapes is considered as a 3D space, right? In order to understand, analyze those situations, being aware of the fundamental principle of unity is really an important thing. In order to count certain elements, the first requirement is that element need to be existed so that we can count it, right? Because of its, if the object need to be present, the element need to be present so that we can count. If the element is absent, we can't count, right? There is nothing exists to count, there's nothing present to count, right? So the minimum quantity of elements that are present to count is 1, right? Another aspect is one as an identity concept. Whenever you study the aspect of functions, there you will be introduced to the aspect of one to one function, right? Where one element has only one pre-image, right? This one-to-one relation, even in our real life, these general scenarios are abstractly considered as elements. This one-to-one type of relation among the elements helps us to understand still further higher type of relations, element of elements. The other aspect is one collection. Coming to the aspect of collection, so the minimum count of, instead of I call it as elements, required for count is nothing but 1 according to base 10 system, and a single line according to tally marks. And specifically, when we need to represent that same number in terms of other languages, we write it as like this. Or according to the Babylonian notation of numbers, we represent it, the unity, as like this. The unity, the uniqueness is represented by like this according to the notation of Babylonian. Right? Our entire mathematics will be covering in terms of base 10 system. Basic about base systems will be covering in the further sessions, where I will be explaining you that every computer that you use, or laptops that you use, that are the programmings that you perform, the algorithms that you design, everything understood by the computer in base to number system, right? Base to number system, combination of zeros and ones, right? So coming to the aspect of collection, see, minimum count of elements required to count is 1, right? But such elements in a huge quantity, it becomes a complicated number, right? So in order to simplify that, certain group of collection of elements is considered as a unity. Let me explain with an example. So we have a single element here. For this single element, we have given certain notation to this, right? Let's roughly consider it as x. For such elements in non-countably huge count, it is difficult to make a record of these objects. Even if we made it, suppose I consider a certain value y, right, which is nothing but some value times this quantity, right? Similarly, even if this quantity of elements got replicated again and again, giving rise to such a huge bulky covered elements, it is still much harder to consider the count with respect to this fundamental count, right? In order to simplify that, this collection of elements is considered as a unit quantity with the notation, with a random notation, let me call it as y, right? Now with this notation, we just count how many such collections are present here. Suppose this collection is present over here, over here, over here, over here, right? So if I so counting such collections in this group, we'll get certain value like m times y, right? It doesn't mean that y is unity. The collection is treated as a unity in order to make the numerical representation simple, right? Another best example lies in the physics. We are aware of weighing machines, right? And the units we use to weight, units. The word itself meant for unity, units. The relative measure of an element with respect to standard element, right? And let me take an example. Suppose I have certain distance here. If I consider this distance to this distance as 1 centimeter, so such combinations is nothing but 1 meter. If such gaps are present, we see certain gaps here, right? If these gaps has a count of 100, then we call it has 100 centimeters, right? The length. So it can be simply written as 1 meter. Again, it is just a collection of unit lengths, but it is treated as a unity, as 1 meter, right? The measurement of dimensions of an object is always a relative term. None of the measures in this world is absolute or unique in their perspective. Every measurement that we make, either the weight or the length or the IQ levels of the human being, they are always the relative terms. The measurement itself is a relative term. Nothing is absolute. Even the position in physics, we heard the aspect of reference frame, right? Reference frame, where we make a standard coordinate system and decide the position, and depending upon the change in the position, we decide the trajectory of the particle, right? Even the position itself is relative according to the reference of the position that we are choosing, right? Every measurement is a relative term, and that relativity is stands upon the strong foundation called 1, which means unity as well as singularity. We already covered the aspect of one object. Huge big count of a number is represented again as another unit with another naming value, such as in terms of centimeter the distance is over 100 units, right? But in terms of meter we brought it to 1 again, right? We are just optimizing the measurement, right? From macro level to the micro level, right? Even measuring the mass of the body, the weight, the forces, everything is a relative term. And the aspect of this unity will be introduced to you again when I start teaching you physics and covering the aspect of mass as a part of Newton's law. See, even in those time, according to the book written by Newton, his definition of mass was completely different. In his handwritten notes, his definition of mass is completely different. It's not like what we are defining in the modern time. I'm saying all these things to you guys because everything is interlinked. Even the aspect of unity is interlinked in measuring the masses, the lengths, whatever the dimensions it might be. Right? This is all about the aspect of 1 as a unique quantity, where the huge value is transformed into another simple unit again, with giving a name as meter to it, right? That's it for this video, guys. We, the sailors, sailing the seas of knowledge, moving across the oceans of mathematics with another new topic. Let's meet in the next video. Until then, bye bye.